Good day, everyone. Today we will be talking about another lesson on Unit 2, Lesson 2, which is about the global societal issues and challenges. Before that, last week we talked about Unit 2, Lesson 1, which is about the globally interconnected world of states. We talked about nation and the state. We also defined nation states, and we learned about the international organization that are major players in globalization. We also talked about the 5 new roles of globalization as of today or in today's age. And now we will move on with Lesson 2 on Unit 2, which is again about global societal issues and challenges. But before that, we have here another quote by Chief Chattel. Let us read it as, "This we know, the earth does not belong to man. Man belongs to earth. This we know, all things are connected like the blood which unites one family. So hold in your mind the memory on the land as it is when you take it, and with all your strength, with all your mind, and with all your heart." So why is this quote relevant to our lesson for today? So it is relevant in a way that it says here that earth does not belong to man and that man actually belongs to earth. When we take global issues and societal issues at mind, we think of all the problems that the man had brought through his environment, and that the ones causing the problems is actually man himself and not the environment. That all things that we give to our environment is actually given back to us by Mother Nature in one way or another. And that is what we will find out today. What are the consequences of man's actions? To begin with, we are to define what are global issues. So global issues, these are problems or dilemmas that affects a large number of people across national boundaries and is beyond the capability of any nation to resolve. So it is a problem that is global in scale. It's not just one nation experiencing it, but it also extends to other states and other countries. It's of significant concern to all or most countries and requires a global regulatory approach to be resolved. So for global issues to be resolved, it doesn't take one day or quickly to be resolved. It has to be of concern of the global public for it to be called or labeled a global issue or dilemma. Some of these problems are, for example, poverty, climate change, health problems or diseases like the COVID-19 pandemic that we are currently experiencing. Other problems may be like migration, financial stability, of course, deforestation on the environment, and also water shortage. So we actually have categories of key global issues. Number one is global economy. These are issues arising from market failures and problems or issues that are on the economic side. So these includes poverty, trade, inequality, migration, financial stability, and debt. Another key global issue is of global environment concern. These includes problems concerning water, forests, energy, the fisheries, climate change, and other problems. Another one is on global human development, including education, health, nutrition, and infectious diseases. For the fourth one, we have global governance. This includes mostly of conflicts in corruption, and the talks about the UN system, global compacts, and international financial institutions. International debt of countries may also fall into the category of global governance. So when studying global issues, we look at ways to analyze them in order to come up with a viable or plausible solution. So we have what we call here the 4-point framework. First, we consider the problem or issue's anatomy. We ask the question, what is the nature and issue and what makes it a global issue? An example here would be China has invaded a foreign territory. Take note, this is just an example, but as you can see, it can also be applied to the Philippines today. But to be more specific, what is happening today is China claiming parts of the West Philippine Sea. Another one of the 4-point framework, we ask about its dynamics. So the question is, what forces are shaping the issue and their likely future trend? This is basically asking what caused the problem, what is its root cause, what could happen in the future if this problem continues. An example would be in the dynamics, still on the same issue. This is the deployment of warship to the disputed territory, printing of map in passports. The third point is we analyze the global issue through asking its actions. So what is being done to address the issue? And who is taking action or by whom? What more should be done? For the example statement, we have the Republic of the Philippines has elevated the issues to the UNCLOS. From the word itself, actions, what is being done to solve the issue or problem? Another point is the consequences. So we ask, what are the likely consequences of inaction or inadequate actions? For the example statement, we have, without action, the other stronger countries can bully its way to the Republic of the Philippines sovereignty. So when we ask of consequences, we analyze the things that could happen in the future if we do not or if we take action, or the effects of anything that we will do with regards to the problem, may it be positive or negative. So that is on about the 4-point framework in analyzing global issues. Next, we will also talk about the forces underlying global issues. So what are the problems or changes in our society or environment that could actually be causing these global issues? Number 1, we have demographic transition. So demographic meaning pertaining to population and transition meaning change. What we mean by this is that demographic change can have an impact on the economy's underlying growth rate, living standards, savings rate, spending, and investment. So it can also have an impact on the long-run unemployment rate and equilibrium interest rate. So housing market patterns and financial asset demands can also be a part or can also be an effect of demographic change. So furthermore, if population rises, it has a negative environmental effect or consequences. Examples of these consequences are increased wastewater kasi marami ng tao. And then we will also have an increased domestic waste and other agricultural wastes. And also this can also be a result of humans increasing their industrial manufacturing practices. Aside from shortages in food and pollution, rise in the population can also have a great impact on the environmental waste that we humans have. Another one is the global income growth and equity or social justice. Living in an unjust environment can induce depression and anxiety, all of which can be harmful to your well-being. People in more egalitarian countries or those countries from the first world countries lives longer, are less likely to be mentally ill or obese, and child mortality is lower. So why does those in the egalitarian countries have better health care? It's obviously because they are rich or they have more money invested on their health service. That is why more people can be treated with the appropriate equipments and could be given the appropriate and sufficient health care. So taking social justice in mind, we also have its opposite, social injustice. So social injustice is when individuals or communities, they are denied of the fair chance to get their fundamental human needs fulfilled. When we say fundamental human needs, this is food, healthcare, security. So when the society cannot provide these things, this is when social injustice happens. So it actually puts limits on people's basic civil rights of people. So it shows a lack of justice or equality. So when this also happens, social injustice happens, that is when people thinks of ways to survive, whatever the means is. Social injustice can also lead to higher crime rates in a country or a nation. So that is on social justice and social injustice. We also have here scientific and technological innovation. So technology, as we know it, has an effect on how people interact, read, and perceive. It contributes to culture and influences how people communicate on a regular basis. In today's world, technology plays a critical role. We may not realize it now, but technology is actually playing a bigger role in our society. It molds us to the kind of people that we are today. For example, think of people today are actually more used to talking online than talking personally. More people are more comfortable in talking through the phone or through the internet, and some of those people are very awkward when it comes to actual conversations. So moreover, technological and scientific innovation has a lot of consequences on the environment and also to the humans. So for example, on people's body, we have eye strain in when we use our phones often, most of the time. And we have also difficulties performing vital activities that can be caused by social media and electronic devices. This may also lead to psychological and, of course, physical problems. They can also play a role in more severe health issues like depression that some people are experiencing right now. And we also think that the excessive usage of technology can have a greater effect on children and adolescents that are still growing. Thinking about all that, technology has a lot of impact on the environment and the human body than we actually think. Another factor that could affect the sprung of global issues is on about global governance and influence of civil society. So global civil society or global governance is responsible for channeling public opinion around the world and putting policy proposals on the international agenda. So as we've talked about our previous lesson last week, we discussed about the UN, the ICC, the NATO, and other global organizations that are actually putting in action global issues on the international level. So these global organizations increases the transparency, as we have discussed about it, of those international decision-making mechanisms, and implicitly improves the capacity of those subjects to control their global behavior. So world leaders are the key here, and they play a significant role in global decision making. When we say global leaders, these are our presidents and our other public servants or representatives on these global organizations. So people trust and actually believes in these leaders that model selflessness. They should model selflessness because they believe that they will be embraced and secured through these leaders. So the degree of concern inspires others to follow suit, resulting in a reciprocity of commitment and appreciation to these leaders. So imagine when they do not do their job right or when they become selfish, that becomes a parang kawalan to the people or to the population that the leader is trying to serve. So they have to be selfless and they have to act not on their own accord, but they must be thinking of their own people. Another underlying issue we have social cohesion. So when we refer to social cohesion, we mean that this is the connectedness and solidarity of societies or other nations and states collectively. So social solidarity, this is the degree of social integration and participation in societies and society at large, as well as the extent to which collective unity manifests itself among individuals and communities, is referred to as social cohesion. So how united a global community is, or how agreeing are they to each with each other, or how this is what we mean by social cohesion. So solidarity in on a social mechanism that seeks to strengthen citizenship diversity through reducing inequalities, demographic gaps, and societal fractures. Social cohesion, how connected are countries that are included in a global organization. So those are the underlying factors that could affect global issues positively or negatively. Why do we need to care about global issues? What's in it for us, ordinary citizens? Although one nation cannot exist without the other, neither can one individual. Understanding global challenges and using your skills to help solve them will not only make you a more thoughtful and a well-rounded citizen, but it will also help the world get closer to a better future. So as what I have said to you at the beginning of this course, awareness is our key goal, is our main goal in the contemporary world. So when we become aware of these social and global challenges, we are also helping ourselves. Because when we think of these issues and other problems, we are thinking about our future. It also develops your well-being. You become a more empathetic person. You empathize with others' struggles. That makes you a much better person when you know or when you learn about global issues and societal issues. Another reason to educate ourselves with global issues is that you students who think about world problems, are more than twice as likely to see the value of taking personal action according to research. They will evaluate the past in order to improve the future by learning about global affairs through the school. So students want to learn how to be better global citizens when they actually try to be curious and educate themselves on these global issues or concerns. You motivate yourself to be the action taker, not just the person who watches on the side. That is what we mean when you educate yourself of these issues on the global scale. You're actually helping yourself. So we have here another question. What makes global issues difficult to resolve? So here are some answers. Number one is failures of group decision making. So many analysts actually believes that the challenge is political and cultural rather than technological when it comes to addressing big social problems through creativity, innovative business models, or global agreements. In a group, especially in global organizations like the UN, taking into account that the world leaders come from different countries and they have different political ideals and they have different cultural backgrounds. Those ideals and cultural backgrounds would tend to clash sometimes. So that is the point where they could not reach a consensus. That is when problems arises, or that makes resolving a global issue more difficult because they can't reach an agreement. They can't reach to an agreement where all of them is in favor of. Let's take for example the 2015 Paris Agreement. This is when the parties to the UNFCCC signed a historical deal to tackle climate change and promote and intensify the efforts and commitments needed for a prosperous low carbon at COP, or Conference of Parties 21 in Paris on December 12, 2015. So We have a long-standing problem on carbon emissions, and this paved way to the 2015 Paris Agreement to have a low-carbon future. In this, politics and culture have been the key roadblocks to the deal, as well as the main obstacles and successes in the years since, because our carbon emissions has long been a problem, hindi lang nitong mga 2015 pa nagsimula. This was ongoing since the Industrial Revolution, when we started using coal and when we burn fossil fuels, when we use petroleum on our daily transportation uses. So after all, the technologies like the renewable energy and other environmentally sustainable developments were already accessible and quickly growing. So the only problem that they could not reach was on the political and on the cultural one. Other countries are big exporters or importers of fuel that are heightening the carbon emissions, and they just could not agree to this 2015 Paris Agreement because it would also affect their economy. So those countries and regions with global leaders who have decided to act quickly and share the ideas and seek counsel across borders are also the ones who have managed to reduce or slow rates of the greenhouse gas emissions on their particular country or region. So they also took the benefit because they acted quickly on it, and they believed that the more sustainable energy is the cure to our growing problem in carbon emissions. Aside from the failure in group decision making, we have what we call the tragedy of commons. So what do we mean by this? So the tragedy of commons, it is an economic dilemma in which everyone has an opportunity to use a resource, but only at the detriment or at the cost of everyone else's sake. So it began with the question actually of what would happen if each shepherd, behaving in his or her own self-interest, allowed his or her own flock to graze the common ground. So when anyone acts on their own perceived best interests, it leads to unhealthy overconsumption. Example, all the grasses were eaten, and then this leads to everyone not getting enough ground to graze in the future. So in 1833, British economist William Forster Lloyd coined the phrase tragedy of the commons. So Lloyd illustrated a hypothetical in a pamphlet in which a shared source is gradually depleted by humans acting solely for their own benefit. To have a more common understanding of the tragedy of commons, we have here an example: deforestation. So the ecosystem has suffered greatly as a result of overexploitation of the world's forests. Our woods have been rapidly disappearing over the last century due to a lack of resource protection. So before, we have an abundant source of trees. So now they are constantly and rapidly decreasing. So this is how the tragedy of common manifests. So we have our short-term goal, and we also have our long-term effect. So in deforestation, our short-term goal is using the wood for fuel, building materials, furniture, and paper tools, weapons, and more. So that is parang from the start, this usage is fair. But on the long term, we have the effects. We have climate change, desertification, soil erosion, and fewer crops. We also include flooding and increased greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, and a host of problems for indigenous people. So at first, okay lang manguha or magputol ng kahoy, but when it is not regularized by authorities, other people will abuse this action, and which leads to deforestation. If people continue become selfish, it will also the effects will also be turned back on them. As we see here, we have the flooding. We also have lesser crop production. And of course, the climate change. Sino bang mas maapektuhan or magrereklamo dyan? It's still us, humans. So that is the short-term goal and the long-term effect. Other than deforestation, we also have the climate change. So in some levels, global warming is the result of a tragedy of the commons, in which governments, corporations, and individuals fails to consider the cumulative impact for their actions on our common environment. So it's not just the ordinary citizen that had their fair share of the climate change. It's also the bigger corporations and companies and also the government that is also contributing to climate change. And when we talk about climate change, it's not just the ice on Antarctica and on the North and South Pole casually breaking off. It's actually the world trying to heat up more every year and every year. And it will gradually become hotter and hotter on Earth. And this will also lead to the mass extinction of a few species. I've read this research once that by 2050, all the fishes will be gone from the ocean. So I don't know if it will actually happen, but it is actually a big possibility if the climate change right now will continue. So it says here that almost half of the rise in greenhouse emissions in the atmosphere over the past 150 years has been caused by human activities alone, and the burning of fossil fuels for electricity, heat, and transportation are the primary causes of greenhouse gas pollution from human activity in the United States and also in the world, in other parts of the globe. So the greenhouse effect, this is the primary cause of climate change. So any gases in the Earth's atmosphere behaves like a greenhouse gas. So they actually trap the sun's heat and it prevents it from escaping into space na nagre-result into a global warming or a more warmer climate that is considered as not normal. From the start, we were trying to mass produce our products by using by using toxic materials to the environment, and then the long-term effect is climate change and pollution. So how can we prevent the tragedy of commons from happening? So it's very simple and plain. The imposition of private property rights, government control, or the establishment of a collective action settlement are all potential solutions to the tragedy of the commons. So if only people will reach an agreement on how to properly use and regularize the usage of these scarce resources, we would prevent our limited resources from being scarce. So take note that a resource must be limited first, competitive in consumption, and non-excludable for a catastrophe of the commons to arise. So there should be first a collective effort to care for other people for the tragedy of commons not to happen. So if people would not only think of their own consumption for the day, so the long-term effect would be better. Next, we have the current mechanisms to solve the global issues. So what are some actions or what does actually people do to solve these global issues? We have the international conventions, treaties, and laws. This is bringing problems to the international level so that they are given more light, and other countries or world leaders will also contribute to finding solutions to these problems. And we have here also the intergovernmental conferences and declarations, much like the first one. This is the first two ones are actually on international law and global organizations. So they serve to meet a basic need of the states to control matters of the shared interest through a consensus, thus bringing stability to their bilateral ties. So since laws include order and help to resolve disruptive confrontations from nations, the international law arises and helps in an attempt to deal with this conflict, may it be environmental, societal, and economical. So these treaties, for example, are the most common basis of international law, as well as the roots of intergovernmental organizations or IGOs. These themselves are important sources of the international law. Another one, we have the G8, G20, and G77 are other similar groupings or global organizations. So if you're asking what is G8, it is an association of the most highly industrialized countries like France, Germany, Italy, United Kingdom, Japan, also United States, Canada, and Russia. So they meet annually to promote global cooperation on topics such as economic growth and crisis management, also global security, oil, and terrorism. While on the other hand, G77, this is the group of 77 nations. This is the United Nations' largest intergovernmental body of developing countries. So they provide a forum for countries in the South to express and foster their common economic interests. They also, as well, strengthen their mutual negotiation power sa major international economic issues. So these are global organizations that helps each country that are included in their group. Another one, we have global partnerships of government, private sector, civil society organizations, and multilateral institutions. Aside from the government, tumutulong din yung mga private sectors and like mga private companies to alleviate global and societal issues. So, who are the key players involved in solving global and societal issues? So, we have here the countries, the UN system, international NGO or non-government organizations, private and government foundations, the global citizens, tayo, transnational corporations, and international financial institutions. All these, or all of us, works collectively to solve global issues. We also have to think that although there are a lot of us, not many would share the same sentiment as we do. For example, the global environmental issues. So, for example, I might be an advocate of environmental awareness, but other people would not agree. So, it's okay. So, the important part is spreading awareness so that other people will also try to join your cause in solving these global issues. As individuals naman, what can we do? The first suggestion is to learn about the issue. So how is this done? This is done through getting familiar with the nature and the dynamics of the issue. Like what we did kanina on the 4-point framework. We analyze the issue through those 4 points. We also find out the actors and their actions or their advocacy groups. Learning about the issue is just like what we did earlier, the 4-point framework. We analyze the anatomy, the dynamics, the actions, and the consequences of taking actions with regards to these global societal issues. That is what we mean by learning about the issue. Educating ourselves or researching more on what is the global issue about. We must learn what it is first before considering our actions that we should take towards it. Another one is to get involved. So how do we do this? So we use our representation and voting rights. So by voting, us people participate in the political process. So people elect politicians to serve them and their opinions, and the elected officials also shares the citizens' goals. So voting is very, very important. So if you're not registered yet, please register because your vote is very, very important and it totally counts in making the society or our nation a better one. Another action that we can take in getting involved is also to support companies that demonstrate social and environmental responsiveness. So, maraming companies today is already hopping on the environmental awareness trend. It is actually great to support them, especially when they are hopping into the trend of their products turning into eco-friendly ones. So they are eco-friendly products are actually more long-lasting, reusable, and also less dangerous. And they use less resources kapag pinoproduce sila. And or they're also safer for the atmosphere, the animals, and also para sa atin na mga humans. Furthermore, using eco-friendly goods can help to preserve not just the environment and the health and well-being of your loved ones, but also the future of our children. So please support these companies or corporations or local stores that cares about the society and the environment. Another one is to develop support by talking to your family and friends. This is what I mean kanina when I say you encourage others to join your cause, because more heads are better than one. Last one, we have to make donations to support issues you care about. So when we say donations, it's not just monetary donations, but also our time. We can dedicate our time to helping resolve these issues. So this is done by supporting projects, whether it be through our time or resources. It will have a huge impact on you and also the rest of the planet. So getting active keeps you connected and encourages everyone's well-being. So it often benefits anyone or something else in the process. So if we don't have any money, there are actually a lot of ways to help. For example, in Facebook or in other social medias, you can just share or upvote these issues so that they also reach the ears of others who are also willing to help or spread awareness about it. So that's the things that we can do as individuals to help resolve these global issues. So that is all about our lesson 2, which is about global societal issues and challenges. We have here our activity 5 entitled Analyzing Global Issues. You are to identify one global issue using the 4-point framework that we have discussed kanina and give your thoughts after it. So the issues can be of global economy concern, global environment, global human development, and also about global governance. You don't have to worry because there are already guide questions in the activity sheet. So if you have any other questions, you can of course DM me or send me a PM on my social media accounts and through my Gmail. We have here our references. And that is all for today. I hope you have a good one. And so yeah, that's all. Thank you for listening and have a great and nice day.